morning, and welcome to the, first Facebook Live Rocky Mountain Goat and Bighorn Sheep orientation. Hey, I want to congratulate you folks all on your coveted once-in-a-lifetime Oregon Bighorn Sheep tag. The Oregon Foundation for North American Wild Sheep and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife would like to assist you in making this a rewarding and memorable experience. We know many of you are veteran hunters, but these tags are really rare and special that we want to do everything possible to ensure that you have a great hunting experience and a successful harvest. Without a lot of sheep hunting experience, it's difficult to know what an old ram looks like. Are you what might it score? Is that the trophy you're looking for? I guess I would suggest anything that you get is going to be a trophy to you. But to assist you in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, we'd like to provide you some information so that you have the knowledge to recognize what that mature trophy bighorn ram looks like in the field. We think the information that our team will be presenting will be extremely valuable in assisting you in this most successful outcome of your hunting opportunity. Bighorn sheep habitat is extremely rugged and challenging. We'd like to also give you some information to prepare you for the physical and mental challenges of sheep hunting. This orientation and workshop typically is a wonderful get-together for all of us. And we get together with all of you and spend time talking, sharing information, telling stories, and getting to know each other. And we usually have a lunch and we usually have an evening barbecue, but this year, as you all know, is different. It's been different with everything that we do. Due to the COVID-19 concerns and associated restrictions. In fact, the restrictions changed as of last Wednesday for us, and we had to adapt to that. So we're going to do this online. So this is our first doing this, so be patient and as we work our way through the agenda. In addition to the information you're going to get today, we suggest that you also contact your individual ODF and W biologists for follow-up conversations. You get do some networking, some map working, and ask questions. Those are the folks that know those animals and know that ground the best. In addition, the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service have information and lots of great maps available, as well as many of the online sites. If you have questions during the presentations, feel free to ask them in the chat room. Just type them in. We'll have someone monitoring that chat room, and they'll share your questions with the presenters. And before we start with the first presenter, we're going to do a draw of our Desert Bighorn Sheep raffle for a hunt with Sierra El Alamo in Sonora, Mexico. Adam Taylor with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife is going to come up and join me for this. I'll spin it and let you do the drawing. All right. Spin it again. All right, you ready? Mm-hmm. The lucky winner is, go ahead and read it.
Alrighty. Brian Ayala, Elko, Nevada.
Excellent.
Brian Ayala, Elko, Nevada.
Cool. Excellent. Congratulations, Brian. Congratulations, Brian, from Brian and Megan from Elko, Nevada. We will be giving you a call. With that, I would like to welcome our first presenter on how to be prepared, how to be physically and mentally ready. And this is by Larry Jacobs, who's the past president of the Oregon Foundation for North American Wild Sheep and is the existing secretary for the National Wild Sheep Foundation. It's yours, Larry.
Thank you, Kevin. And again, congratulations, all you tag holders. And I'm sure you'll have a great hunt and enjoy your hunt. When we talk about sheep hunting, it's hard to talk about sheep hunting without at least mentioning sheep shape. Most of the habitat that sheep are in pretty rugged country and steep terrain and everything. So it's important to at least evaluate what kind of shape you're in for hunting, and we're going to make some suggestions on this, and these are just suggestions. So I would say, it's important that each of you kind of look at your own situation, the area you're going to be hunting, what kind of shape you're in, and then kind of set up your own program for getting in some kind of shape to do your hunt. You can look at the picture here. This is some sheep habitat. If you're having to start from the bottom and work your way up, sheep are going to be up there, probably somewhere's up around that snow line. So, that's sheep country. And I like to break, workout routine into 4 sections, and that would be cardio, strength, agility, and stamina. And again, here's sheep habitat. So, if this is where you're going to be hunting, you can see where you need to at least do some kind of a workout. When we talk about cardiorespiratory conditioning, climbing steep slopes at altitude with a heavy pack is going to require some kind of fitness. Basically any kind of exercise that's going to make you breathe hard for a long period of time, like, walking, hill climbing, jogging, running, biking, swimming, any of those things, as long as you're, it's going to make you, breathe hard and build up that lung capacity, are things that you can include in your workout. And try and do it at least 3 times a week, at a target heart rate, and make, just make it routine. Again, here's some more sheep habitat. This is right on the Snake River between Oregon and Idaho. Second would be strength. And I would suggest that you work mainly on your legs and back and hip muscles. It can be very helpful if you can build up at least those leg muscles. One thing I usually suggest is that if you're going to be working out, or you're in an area where you can do some hiking and some steeper country, is put some jugs of water in your backpack and head out hiking. And if it's too much and it's wearing you out, you can always dump some water. But these hot days that we're having now, you might be thankful that you do have that water. But again, work on those legs, work on the cardio, work on your lung capacity. The next one is agility. I always tell people that once they get warmed up a little bit, it's really good to do some stretch exercises and stretch those muscles out and loosen up a little bit. It'll really help with your range of motion and help with your agility and flexibility. Again, if you're gonna, to build up that agility, do some packing in really uneven ground, and it's going to help with the strength also. Here again, here's some sheep habitat. You can see some of that country can be pretty steep and rugged. And if you've got the opportunity to get out there in some of that country and do some scouting and packing and stuff, it's I really encourage you to do that. So lastly, stamina, which is the sum total of all conditioning. I like to tell people that if you feel like you're wore out and you're hiking up the hill, and you want to take a rest, look up ahead there, another 20, 30 yards, and push yourself that extra 20 or 30 yards to help build up some stamina. Again, here's another good area. I've seen sheep right in this picture up in Hell's Canyon numerous times. So this is sheep habitat, and that's what that country looks like. Again, take into consideration the area you're going to be hunting. Evaluate yourself in respect to the goals, and train your weakness. Evaluate yourself and train your weakness. So. We all come in different sizes, and we're all in different shapes and stuff, and look at the area you're going to be hunting, or the area that you have a tag for. Try and get out there and do lots of hiking and scouting in that area. That's probably the best advice that I can give you. I'd like to now introduce Jeremy Thompson. Jeremy's going to be talking with you on field judging. Jeremy's a district biologist here out of the Dells. Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Larry. So as we go through this, I've put about 4 presentations we generally do into one. So as we go, folks, if you have questions, make sure to pop them in the comment box. We'll be monitoring as we go. If it's a question that we think we want to get to right now, the folks in the crowd will let me know and we'll jump into that. If not, we'll address all those questions at the end of my presentation. So put them in there and we can interact a bit as we go. So as a field biologist with sheep, one of the first questions I always get is about the size of the rams from when a hunter draws. And I think it's important that we kind of talk about, what constitutes the size of the score of a ram, just so that we're all talking the same language. So when we look at a ram, we break it out, and the score, the first part is the length of the horn. So we will start at the base of the horn and take a measurement all the way out to the tip. So it's a point perpendicular to this tip here at the end of the horn. And then we go through and we take 4 diameter measurements. That is what constitutes the score on a bighorn sheep. So as we start talking about numbers, that's the where we derive that number from. When you check in your sheep, and we'll talk a little bit more about sheep check-in at the end of my talk, we keep a record of all sheep just as a way to match the pin in the horn to a specific animal. So this is an unofficial score that will be done by the biologist in the district in which your hunt exists. So we will fill all this out and we'll take all those measurements that we just talked about. So more important to the score is how we discuss sheep. Sheep are managed on a pretty conservative harvest basis. There's ample opportunity to go out and find a mature ram, and we encourage that with our hunters so that we can target that part of the population that is on the back end of the curve from the breeding cycle. So we're encouraging you to go out, spend the time, look at rams, and find those mature rams in the population. As you talk to your biologist for your specific hunt, we're going to talk a lot about mass. Everybody talks about the mass on a bighorn sheep, which is just the diameter. That's when we talk about the mass on the horns of a sheep, we're talking about the diameter of the horn as we go. And this is one of the greatest spots to see that is when you put a bunch of rams next to each other, you can start to see how that mass looks compared to some of the other individuals. It's good. You can see some younger rams with a shorter horn and some of the, a little bit more mature rams that are starting to push that mass, that bigger diameter out into the second and third quarter. You always hear about curl, right? So a lot of areas, if you're familiar with sheep biology, we talk about full curl or 3/4 curl. The curl is just the length. And it's measured, using a kind of a gun sight methodology is what we use in a 3/4 curl or better regulation. Lining up the gun sight between the eye and the base of the horn. How far does that horn come around in comparison to the eye? You can see that this one is past 3/4, coming up closer to a full curl. So another thing I think is really important, as you look at the curl on a ram, is there's a lot of different variations. Our sheep have a lot of variations, just as our habitats do in the state of Oregon. So you want to go through and look and start to acclimate your eye to what you think is the best looking ram for the hunt unit you're in. This is a ram that's got a kind of indicative tight curl. You can see that the horns stay very close to the face. You'll also see some that flare out. This one, you can see how those tips are coming out. It's a little bit tough at this angle, but the tips come out. You can see them moving away from the face on this ram. Another nice thing about this picture, it may be hard through the video feed, but another way to help you field judge sheep is to try to age them. So we can go through on a sheep in a field setting and get a pretty good estimation of age based on these growth rings. You can see this dark ring right here and here. That is an annual growth. So there's a ring here and a ring here. That is 1 year of life for that ram. Typically, those growth rings occur in the winter as biological growth slows down and they're kind of going into maintenance mode over winter. They'll put that growth on. The horn growth will stop for the year. It will pause, and it will create a definitive line. And when you come check in your ram at the end of your hunt, this is how we will age your sheep. We don't have to pull a tooth on sheep because we can count those rings and know how old that ram is at the time of harvest. So again, this is that same ram. You can see compared to, this ram who had the tight curl, this is one that has a little bit more flair to it, right? The horns come out a little bit. These are both California rams, so you get a little bit different horn configuration typically in Californias. Again, just another picture of Californias. This one I like to point out because I think the best way for you to not only start acclimating yourself to field judging for rams, but to also start figuring out what you want for a ram when you're out on your hunt is to try to find these bachelor groups this time of year and compare rams side by side. The first ram you see, if you've never been in sheep country, you're going to think it's huge. It can be a 2-year-old ram. The first one you see, these critters are impressive. They've got great horns right out of the gate. But then, hopefully you'll be able to get a couple groups like this where you can see a couple rams that really stand out from the crowd, especially from a 3-year-old ram and a 4-year-old ram down here, to where you can see that horn growth characteristic and start to get your eye accustomed to what you want to look for during your hunt. Again, just another great picture of being able to line them out. This is in the Deschutes, and this is pretty common. You'll come over a rise and have sheep peeking at you. Again, this is what you guys want to get out and look at, and gals want to look at over the next couple months before your hunt, or the next month if you've got one of the early seasons. Get out and start looking at sheep country to figure out what you like for rams. So again, I talked a little bit about horn configuration difference. These are Rocky Mountain Bighorns and some exceptional cases of that. This is in Hell's Canyon. You can see that when we get into Rockies, same general characteristics. We're still looking at length. We're still looking at mass. But typically because of the habitats that Rocky Mountain Bighorn live in, they're going to push a longer horn. You can see, again, here's the eye, and we looked at that earlier on that California ram. You can see how far past the eye the tips are on these rams. California Bighorns, because they live in such an open rocky environment, a lot of times they're rubbing those horns on rocks as they feed. That creates brooming. So brooming is a term used for rubbing the tips of the horns off on a ram. Brooming will happen in Rocky Mountains, but it's much less common. So you can find these longer horned rams that get that big full curl or past a full curl in a Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep, where you generally don't find as many full curls in the Californias. You also have a lot of our Rocky Mountains live in a habitat where there's a higher summer precipitation, so that helps them grow a little bit thicker horn than a lot of our desert sheep, that are Californias that live in our desert environment, where there's a lot less precipitation and vegetation's harder to come by throughout a lot of the year. So the take home for me on this is a hunter's ultimate goal. Your goal needs to be to go out and find a ram that you are going to be proud of and you want to look at on your wall for the rest of your days, right? This is our once in a lifetime opportunity in Oregon to harvest a ram. I encourage hunters to get out, acclimate their eye, figure out what they like as far as sheep characteristics. Don't get hung on a number, but find one that's going to look good on your wall and a good representative of the population you've hunted. So it sounds like we don't have any immediate comments right now. No questions? Okay. So again, if something pops up on judging sheep, you can pop it in through my next couple talks too, or at the end. It's not a big deal whenever you want to put it in. Also, this is one of those things that, you can discuss, and it's really important to discuss with the local biologist, because every population's different, and that maximum growth potential and what's in those populations varies depending on the landscape, depending on the vegetation, and the precipitation within that zone. So the next topic I want to touch on really briefly is disease. The majority of our time as bighorn sheep managers is spent on trying to mitigate the impacts of disease in bighorn sheep. As you look around the state of Oregon, we have multiple populations right now that are suffering due to pneumonia disease within those bighorn sheep. Hell's Canyon has had long-term disease issues. All of our southeast Oregon, Owyhee country is now suffering from disease. And as many of you know, we had to cancel the Lookout Mountain hunt this year because of a new disease outbreak in Lookout Mountain. So we as biologists rely really heavily upon our hunting constituents to be extra eyes and ears for us out in the field to help us identify potential issues and to help us get samples to look at that as we go through the harvest season. So respiratory disease, it's a pneumonia, gets in the lungs. We see basically an all-age die-off, and generally what we've seen in Oregon so far is a long-term decline in recruitment. So the ewes that survive the initial disease outbreak have a much lower fecundity, meaning they're not going to produce lambs, or those lambs, once born, become infected with the disease and they perish quite quickly. One of our biggest concerns is, so far, a lot of our current disease is isolated, but there's always the potential to move it into new populations, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing the sampling that we are. The disease is spread through nose-to-nose contact. It's got to be an infected individual coming into close contact with an uninfected individual. Bighorn sheep, depending on the population, may not move much until we start talking about young rams. So there's always an opportunity for young rams to move great distances, especially within our Rocky Mountain bighorn populations that are migratory. But we also have to worry about domestic sheep. That's the current scientific consensus, is that domestic sheep are the primary carrier that introduced this disease to our bighorn sheep. That the bighorn were naive to it, and that's what led to their extirpation when Europeans first settled North America. Domestic goats can also provide that vector, can carry that disease. So with a lot of the new backcountry, pack goat concerns, we want to be cautious of that if we're taking goats out into bighorn country. And then feral sheep can as well. So mouflons, barberry, they can be a potential vector.
We have a question from Mike Paget specifically on disease.
Okay.
He asks, is disease the cause for no tags in Hart Mountain this year also?
So Hart Mountain has multiple concerns going on. Hart Mountain's been on a long-term decline. Some of our initial research in Hart doesn't point to disease being the initial downturn for the sheep population. There was definitely some predation-related issues. Sheep are very susceptible. You're talking about satellite populations that, once a suite of predators moves in, if the sheep are naive to that as well, it can have pretty detrimental effects because of our sheep being isolated and not interconnected like our other big game species would be. But we also have some potential for disease too, as we've seen this spread through Southeast. So there's multiple issues going on at Hart. Hart, they didn't have the mature rams in the remnant population that's there to be able to warrant a tag.
We have another question from Joe, and this will help the rest of the tag holders. Joe asks, who's the local biologist for John Day River and contact info?
Okay, so at the end of this, everybody that attends today, we're going to send you guys an email with the contact. For Joe, I'm one of the contacts for the John Day River, but we want to make sure generally at this orientation, we have a breakout session at the end where you actually get to spend some one-on-one time with the biologist. Obviously, because of all the gathering restrictions, we had to go with this platform this year. We're going to try to set up, so like for the John Day and the Deschutes and some of the Southeast Oregon hunts, myself and my counterpart out of Lakeview, we're going to try to put together some virtual meetings so that we can all get in one spot. There's value to hunters meeting together. Not only do you get to meet each other and share contact info if you so desire, but as we share questions, I think there's some real value in that. And then for a lot of the other hunts, we'll be giving you the phone numbers for the biologists for those units, so you can contact them and meet with them, in whatever manner meets best for both of you. So coming back to this, those are great questions. Thank you, by the way. If you see any of these within bighorn range while scouting or during your hunt, or even in the periphery of bighorn range on your way to your hunt zone, let your local biologist know. Most of the local bios, when you make contact with them, you're not only going to get their office phone number, but most of us are going to give you our cell phone numbers. Yeah, again, we rely on our sheep hunters for a lot of information. Don't hesitate to get a hold of them. Okay, so if you're out looking at when you're out looking at sheep, not if, you all need to get out and go look at some sheep. These are the symptoms we want you to be aware of, right? So if you see any nasal discharge, snotty, runny nose, bouts of coughing, head shaking, and I'll have a video that shows head shaking here in a little bit, or lethargy. So it's pretty common when we're doing sheep surveys from a helicopter. One of our key indicators for disease is as we start to move a herd up a hill, you see one or two lag behind, and they just can't keep up. That's a good indicator to us that there may be something going on, right? It's a respiratory disease. It's pneumonia. It's very similar to what happens to humans when we get pneumonia. Their lungs fill up with fluid. They can't respirate. They can't get enough oxygen. If you see something, as much info as you can, right? Take pictures. Give me a geotag. Let me know where you saw it, when you saw it, what you saw. The more information, the better. And then this bottom note, herd composition, and hopefully you guys can all read our screen. Even if you're not seeing disease, I love it when my hunters are keeping track of what they see and where, right? I'm not going to give out the big ram spot to the other hunters. You don't have to tell me where the big ram is. But if you're seeing ewe lamb groups, having some of that data over time helps us look at our lamb ratios as we do our surveys. I take a one snapshot approach to sheep surveys. I only look at them in March. So being able to get hunter data throughout the summer to know, what my lamb ratios are through time is super beneficial to me. So, I hate this picture. Breaks my heart. You can see some of that. It's raw on the upper lip on this lamb. That's from them licking from a runny nose. You'll see these sores around the mouth. Just generally kind of an unhealthy appearance on that lamb. We're going to try to play a video here. We'll see if it'll go. Some coughing going on there. You can all see him with kind of that excessive, lip licking, licking the snot off their nose. You won't see a sheep in the wild. If it doesn't have something wrong with it, you're not going to see one with that type of coughing. That's completely abnormal. That's indicative solely of disease. There's the head shaking that we talked about. So, that's what we look for in disease. Those are those signs. Please keep an eye out. Anything you see in the field, let us know, communicate. We're here to help, and hopefully, you guys can help us if some of that stuff's going on. So I'm going to start into the third leg of the presentation that I have. Again, this used to be about 2 hours when we all met in person with 4 different people, so I'm trying to wrap up what a lot of people say. The next thing I want to touch on for all of you is bighorn hunting behavior. Kind of some of the things we want to think about when we're out in the field hunting bighorns and how to approach that hunt. And I'll apologize. This presentation was put together by one of my mentors, a longtime sheep biologist for the state that is way better at talking about this than me. But I'm going to do my best to try to give you some pointers and get you started on the right track of where you need to go and what you need to be thinking about. So, first, kind of looking at bighorn biology, bighorns are social, right? So as you're out scouting this time of year, as you get into your hunt, you're going to see groups of bighorns together. And those groups are going to be separated by sex, right? So you're going to have the ewes and the lambs. Throughout most of our California bighorn country and a lot of the Rocky country, those ewes and lambs are going to be closer to the rivers, closer to water. They're going to congregate. They're generally going to stay pretty close to the cliff structure. They're going to want to be close to escape habitat. Sometimes the rams can be close. Sometimes they're in completely different country. So, it's one of those that you got to kind of get that feel for the local biology of sheep and their local patterns. But you're going to see segregation of ewes and lambs and rams. You're not going to find the ram you want in with the ewes throughout the summer. Now that's going to change if you have some of the later season hunts, if you're in one of like the Deschutes or the John Day. But throughout this period, they're going to be completely separate. We also see some of our herds are migratory. That's our Rocky Mountain Bighorn herds. All of our California Bighorn sheep herds are all resident. Where you find them now, you're going to find them year-round pretty much. But some of the Rockies will migrate, so keep that in mind and maybe ask your bio if you have a Rocky tag, when to expect some of that migratory movement. So unlike a lot of the species that we get to hunt more often in the state of Oregon, sheep are diurnal. So they do almost all of their activity during the daylight hours. They're going to get up at dawn. They're going to feed. By mid-morning, they're going to bed down. They're going to look for a little bit of shade, and they're going to find a rock to hide under and let the sun pass. Usually what you find, at least through a lot of the country that I work in, is as the sun comes over into the mid-afternoon sun and the shade changes, those sheep will get up and kind of feed for an hour or two as they go around to the other side of the ridge to find the afternoon shade. And then as the sun starts to set and it starts to cool down a little bit in the evening, they're going to get up again and they're going to feed till after dark and bed down. That's something important to remember. If you're watching a ram and you watch him till dark and put him to bed, if you're there at sunrise, he's going to be super close to where you left him. So you can bed him and come back to him really easy. The rams are going to be in bachelor groups. So the rams all get together, and sometimes those groups can be pretty big. If you remember back to kind of my first presentation, I had pictures of 20, 30 rams standing together. That's very common. I would say that if you see one or two rams together off outside of a group, make sure you pay special attention to them. You see a lot of times that the older rams, as they've kind of passed their peak, maybe they're the biggest ram on the mountain, but they're not the most aggressive ram, right? They're probably not that prime breeder anymore. They'll pull out of that bachelor group. And those bachelor groups, we always talk about the headbutting behavior, and I got a great picture of it here later. But, that push and pull for position and power within the rams takes place all year. So within this bachelor group, they're setting that hierarchy, the structure of who's the boss early on. And once some of these guys get too old and too tired, they pull off on their own. So if you see that one or two rams together, make sure you're watching them. The other thing about rams is generally they're going to use less rugged territory than ewes. It's very common to see a bachelor group of rams out on a big open grassy knoll in the Deschutes or John Day canyons, just in the wide open, a long ways from any rock structure. They use their eyes and they'll run away. They don't rely on the rocks for protection of the young nearly as much as the ewes do, although you can still find them in that. They're also going to brush up a lot more than a ewe. Again, their escape strategy and predator avoidance strategy is just a little bit different than the moms. So, they'll get up in the brush where they can find forage, but maybe a little bit more susceptible. And like any sheep, they're going to find shade. Even in that open hillside, if there's one rock and one shady spot, that better be the first spot you look at, because a ram's probably sitting in that shady spot if it's the only shade around. They're also lazy. Like rams will lay around all day and just sit on that open hillside. When they get up and feed, they might not go far. When I look at some of our data we've collected in the Deschutes, we've got one ram group in the Deschutes that their entire summer home range constituted about 2,500 acres. They went nowhere. They had everything they needed in a small area and they just hang out. So that's to your advantage when you're scouting. Like when you find rams, especially in the California Bighorns, generally they're going to stay pretty close to the same spot all summer long. But even though they're in that one spot, it's not going to be uncommon for them just to pick up and take off one day. They may go from one corner of their home range to the other. I was fortunate enough to hunt sheep years ago. I had been watching a ram for 4 days in the same spot. The day I decided he was the one, he packed up and went about 5 miles on us. First time he'd moved since I'd started hunting him. Something else, so for those of you that have, the rut hunts, the later season hunts, those rams completely change their pattern come the rut. They're going to come out of that high open country. They're going to be down in with the ewes. So wherever you've been seeing ewes all summer during your scouting, that's where you're going to find the rams. and they may start at one U group in the morning and be at the furthest away U group at night. So you're going to see those mature, dominant rams covering a lot of ground during the rut. And as you start going out and looking, as they move, you're going to see that those rams, one's feeding, they're going to have one on a spot kind of watching. And again, they're lazy. It may not be very evident, but they always kind of post a sentinel. And you'll see that as you watch ewes, that's very, very evident with ewes. Generally, that big ram's going to take the lead as they move out. So, we talk about dominance. Even if your hunt's early in the season, you got to go back and visit your hunt area about October, November, just so you can see this. You're about to hear two 2x4s clank together about as hard as you've ever heard. This is how sheep decide who's the boss, right? This is their rut. This is their competition for breeding dominance within their population. Yeah.
Patty asks, when is the rut?
So generally that rut period is going to be October to November, depending on which herd you're in. Deschutes is probably one of our earliest rutting herds just because of the habitat and the landscape. We go through in the Deschutes, we think about first week of October. We always think buck season is generally the start of our good rut. Some of our Southeast Oregon herds, that rut may be later. And that's really, sheep seem to be very good at adapting their estrus cycle. So when the females come in to heat for breeding, they seem to be very good at adapting that to take advantage of that prime green up period in the spring. So we've seen sheep change that rut cycle, to adapt to a new habitat when we transplant them. So if you haven't figured it out yet, as soon as you started telling your friends that you had a sheep tag, you probably came up with a lot of new friends. It's good to ask for help. Usually it's not hard to find when you have a sheep tag. I can look out in this room with the 9 other people in here. If you're having a hard time finding friends for your sheep hunt, there's a lot of guys in here that are nodding their heads, raising their hand right now that would love to come hunt. You want to make sure you wear light colored clothing. You want to blend in. It's camouflage is good, but it doesn't have to be, right? And I think there's some variability depending on the hunt unit you're in on what you want to do. I've had hunters in the Deschutes that had a harder time getting close to sheep in camouflage than they did wearing regular clothes. In those sheep herds where they see rafters, they see boaters all summer like many of our canyon sheep hunters do, it's probably pretty common that they're used to seeing regularly dressed people. So pay attention, but in general, you don't want to stand out. You want to blend in. And that's like any other hunting scenario. You don't want to walk on top of the ridge, step off, don't skyline yourself. Sheep have great eyes. Keep yourself, down and out of the way. If you haven't spent much time in sheep country, you're going to find it's really easy to roll rocks. Larry showed us some pretty indicative pictures of what sheep country looks like. All those rocks are waiting their turn to get to the bottom of the hill. If you send one, the sheep are going to pay attention. That's a pretty common indicator of trouble for them. Dress in layers. So even in some of our hottest environments, it's going to be cold in the morning. You're going to see probably one of the greatest temperature swings on a hunt that you've ever had in sheep. And then be careful with fire. We've had so many impacts to a lot of our habitats throughout Southeast Oregon and into North Central Oregon from fire. Be cautious. If you're used to only hunting deer and elk, being out in August is a completely different time window, and it's amazing how little it takes to start a wildfire in a lot of our country. I think as you get hit up by all of your friends that want to tag in on your sheep hunt, you want to take a buddy, let them carry all the heavy stuff, make sure you have your rifle, you have your shells, but spread the load. Some sheep hunts can be easy to get into rams, others are going to take you a long time, and that country that we're talking about can wear you down quicker than what you may realize if you're not ready for it. So use the friends you have and let them carry the burden. Big thing about spotting sheep is have good optics. This is the one excuse you have to go buy those optics you've always wanted. You're going to be in open country. Spotting them from a long ways is important because they're going to spot you. Sheep essentially have 10-power binos for eyes. They're going to see you from an amazingly far distance. You'll be amazed the first time you see a ram watching you and you're a mile away, but it will happen. As you move, even though you're in wide open country, sheep can hide pretty easy. So as you step into a spot, make sure you glass close and then grid to far. Use that spotting scope a lot. And my predecessor that created this, his favorite sheep term is, shade up and act like a ram. It's going to be long days. It's middle of summer. Find a shady spot midday or mid-morning and sit down and take a nap. It's amazing how many rams come out of the woodwork as you're hiding in ram country. So, when you're trying to get to them, as we talked about, it's easy to bed them down. It's easy to leave them in a spot. If you're moving at rams far away, be ready to stumble on some up close. Again, the country may look open, but it's amazing how many creases and folds there are to hide sheep. Everybody, we always encourage you try to get close. This country, again, with those folds and creases, it's really easy to sneak in close and get up on those rams. They're tougher than you'd think, and you want to make sure you're in close and you get a good shot. Make sure your buddy's watching. Let them spot your shot. Let them call it. And make sure you're ready for a follow-up shot. You don't want these rams getting into a spot where you can't get to them. And that happens to hunters quite a bit in this type of country. There's spots where a ram can get that you can't to get them out. So it's good to get in close and make that first shot count. We encourage everybody, if you make a mistake, report it. We've had multiple instances of not seeing the ram behind a ram. Those things happen. That's part of the communication with us. Just let us know. Know what you're going to do with your horns before you go on your hunt. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. And then make sure that you've communicated with the biologist for your hunt about checkout. So it's required that every hunter within 3 days at the end of their hunt checks out that ram. So you need to make arrangements with the biologist for the unit you're hunting to know how you're going to check out. And when you check out, that's when they're going to measure with the score sheet we had earlier, and they're going to put a pin in the back of the horn. Last thing I wanted to hit on really quick so I can leave a little bit of time for questions. So I've only got about 2 more slides. If you've got questions, let them roll and we can get going to them. Caring for your trophy. I'm not a taxidermist, but what I'm going to tell you is if you're going to taxidermy your trophy, kind of know what you want to do prior to your hunt. Have that picked out. Have the communication with someone who's going to either help you with that or know your plan on what you're going to do prior to going on your hunt. I've had a lot of hunters that, they thought, well, I'll just boil the skull, and then once they're at the animal, they realize that might be a really cool shoulder mount. You might be too late at that point, right? So when you start talking about hunting in August and being in hot country, you're going to have to plan ahead for what you're going to do with that cape, right? You're going to have to get as much of the meat off the cape as you can. You need to salt it, but then you need to take it out at night and you need to hang it up and get the moisture out of it and let that thing dry. This is something that your taxidermist will cringe if you bring your head in one of those, unless you're going to freeze it before you take it to him. That's the only time this is ever allowed on an animal head or cape, is if you're going to put it in the freezer. Then you can put it in here. Make sure you got game bags to put your head and your cape in, as well as your meat. That'll help keep the flies out of it and keep that cape good. The taxidermists that I've always talked to about sheep, this is where probably some of the greatest spoilage comes within capes, is on these animals because of the hunt period. It's also near impossible to get a replacement cape. No one can sell you a cape in the state of Oregon because of our limitation on trade in sheep parts. If your cape goes south, it's very, very difficult to find a new one. So have that plan, know what you're going to do, communicate with your taxidermist, and make sure you're lined up before you go on your hunt. With that, I wanted to leave us about 10 minutes here for questions.
Yeah, so Jeremy, we have one question going back to sickness and disease in sheep. Okay, Rob asks, is there a vaccine for the pneumonia that the sheep get, or do we let nature take its course?
So there's a lot of research going towards a vaccine. There's a lot of work going on at multiple universities and multiple state agencies that have been trying to find a pathway forward with respiratory disease. Currently, there is no vaccine. Vaccines are also very difficult in any wild population. So even once we get one, it will be very difficult to try to administer it to wild sheep. Really right now, our primary management tool to limit disease is to limit contact. So most of our efforts at the management level go into, working with private landowners that have livestock and trying to utilize grazing regimes and utilize our state actions of where we put sheep to minimize the opportunity for the domestic sheep and the wild sheep to come into contact with one another. That's really the only way that we have right now, until we find some type of vaccine and a way to administer it that we can limit the spread of the disease.
That's all we have for questions, but there may be some lag time in between
Okay.
our live stream and people viewing. So we'll give it about 5 minutes, and we will leave this screen up. And if there are more questions, we'll invite you back up.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I mean, again, the one thing I want to circle back to and really hammer home to everybody, hopefully, is don't get hung up on a number when you're out looking at sheep. Go find the ram that looks the best to you. I've had multiple hunters that want an old broomed off ram that may not score as high as a ram that's never broomed in the California Bighorns, but it may look much better on your wall. That may be the trophy you want, and make sure that you've decided what you want for a trophy and don't just look at numbers. You'll be happier in the long run. So, but we'll be here. If questions pop up, they can come up through any of them. Yeah.
Donnie asked, is there going to be a list of good sheep taxidermists provided?
I would guess generally once you draw a sheep tag, a lot of those taxidermists start sending you flyers. I encourage everybody to talk to anybody else that's had a sheep tag to get those personal contacts. If you can, if you know other people that have any kind of taxidermy on their wall, go look at theirs, right? A taxidermist is an artist. They truly are. And, art looks best to the eye of the beholder. So go out and look at the individual flare. Walk into a few shops of some of the, we have some amazing taxidermists in this state. If you call up, they're all going to let you roll through the shop and look at some of their work. Again, they're artists. They're proud of what they do. Go out and build a relationship that way and find one that works best for you. You also need to think about where that taxidermist is at. So if you're rolling out of the Steens with a ram and you live in Coos Bay, you probably don't want a taxidermist in Portland, potentially, because now you've got to care for that cape even longer to get it to them so that they can get it ready.
Patty asks, how close are we on management objectives for counts and age?
It depends on the unit. That's going to be one of those questions for your biologist. It's like any of our game species, we're across the board. As you look at the Deschutes in the John Day Canyon, the Potamus area, McClellan, Aldrich, all of those are very healthy bighorns, kind of the north central component of our herds. They have yet to experience some of the downturns we've had elsewhere because of disease. They're all, at or above management objective. You'll see in the 2021 regs, there's a potential for some U-hunts in our bighorn herds because we are above our management objective. And one of the ways that we as sheep managers manage the potential for drift within the population and connecting with disease vectors is to limit the density of the population. We keep our bighorn sheep herds at a specific level, hoping that they have less of a tendency to migrate. Historically, we've done that through trap and transplant. Currently within the state, because of some of the disease outbreaks, we have less places to transplant sheep. So we're managing it that way.
Speaking of disease outbreaks, Ben Titus asks, what is the management plan for the Lookout Mountain population now that they have pneumonia?
Yep, so we're actually going into a monitor mode in Lookout Mountain. The biologist out of Baker City is proposing to put a bunch of collars out. Pneumonia outbreaks, because it's a novel, the specific MOVI strain, that's Mycoplasma ovopneumonia, that's the bacteria that causes the pneumonia within bighorn sheep. And I guess every virus gets a nickname. It's MOVI for sheep. Because this one's unique, we don't know how virulent it will be. So at this point within the disease outbreak, the plan is to capture, collar, and monitor to try to look at how quickly this herd may recover. There's been multiple instances of short-term disease outbreaks within bighorn sheep, and they recover naturally on their own. Yakima River Canyon is the closest one in Washington. They had about a 2-year downturn, and then their reproduction went right back up, and they're back to a healthy population. Others, like what we see in the Lostine or in Hell's Canyon, has been this long-term chronic decline of sheep. So the first step is to figure out where we're at in and look out and what this may look like in the next couple years.
And that's it for now. We have about 10 minutes until Mountain Goat starts, so we'll leave it open for questions.
Okay, and we also have, so Walter Chuck wanted to come up. He's our past president. I'll get him coming this way, and then if you have a question, I can answer it on his walk up. Walter's going to come up. He's our past president for Oregon FNAS and wants to talk a little bit about what Oregon FNAS does and why they organize this event.
Patty asks, what role does water play for sheep, like deer and antelope?
So if you look at most bighorn habitat, especially in California bighorn sheep, water's one of the limiting factors, right? There's not a lot of free water available within those populations. So identifying their water source is probably a good tactic if you're outside of one of the river canyons. Obviously in the river canyon, those sheep have a lot of water down at the river, but you'll find that most river sheep would prefer to find a spring on the hillside and use that rather than go down to the river. They're much more susceptible to predation down on a riverbank than they are at a spring up on the hillside where their escape cover's at.
Thank you for the answer. And that's it for now, and I'll let you know if there's more.
Perfect. All right, Walter?
Thank you, Jeremy. As Jeremy said, I'm Walter Chuck. I am also the past president of Oregon FNAS. I'm also a member of the Oregon Sheep Hunters class of 2012. And I'd like to congratulate all of you folks that are joining us online, and very sorry that we are not able to meet with you in person. That is one of the biggest benefits of having this workshop and us getting our message out, is to meet with you folks, because this is the first time and only time they'll draw this tag, to make sure that you have the best experience possible. So I've been coming to the orientation for the last 8 years. First as a tag holder. I was a first-time hunter presenter. I'm a board member, and also, to much chagrin of the other board members, my son also drew a tag in a few years later. Sheep hunting gets in your blood. I had never done it before. I'd gone on one hunt prior to drawing my tag, and look where I am now. I've met and worked with some of the best people since I drew my tag. Oregon FNAS members, members of National Wild Sheep Foundation, members going to the sheep show, ODFW staff. These are some of the most helpful and sincerely nice people that I've met working with the state agency. OSP officers, they're usually here. They're very helpful. They don't want to make this a hard hunt for you folks. They want to make sure that you have all the information and everything you can do to make sure that you conduct yourself properly in the field. Fellow tag holders, past and present, I was amazed after I drew the tag and became part of the sheep club for Oregon. Everybody wants to talk about it, whether you've drawn the tag, gone on a hunt, or anything, even been around one. It's a great community, and it's actually more of a family member. There's been less than 4,000 sheep killed in the state of Oregon, so that's a pretty unique club. So don't forget that. And out there, as Jeremy said, he has a lot of sheep enthusiasts. We call them the sheep groupies. They come to the workshop every year just to hang out and talk to the tag holders, lend advice. It's a great community. This isn't like an elk hunt. It isn't like a deer hunt. We have nothing to hide from you folks. Once we've drawn the tag, our information is all yours, and the past tag holders is the same. Like I said, by drawing this tag, you've entered a very special select group and have an opportunity to go on a hunt that many will only be able to dream of and spend great sums of money to do. Every year we have an auction tag at the National Wild Sheep Show. We call that the governor's tag. In the last three to 5 years, it's an average of $160,000. Some people might bristle at this, but you need to know that that money raised at that show and for that tag can only go to sheep management. And many of those funds are leveraged with Pittman Robertson funds, which you pay a tax on when you buy fishing and hunting equipment. And so that can be matched for 3 to 1. So that $150,000 can become almost $500,000. So that is a good thing. And some of the projects we do in sheep country, they don't just benefit sheep. They benefit everything. They benefit goats, quail, chuckers, and everything like that. So anything we do in sheep country benefits everything else. Oregon FNAS, we also raise money through our banquet, auctions, and raffles. We use those funds for grant and aid projects, youth education, disease research, such as sponsoring collars, collar purchases, and habitat projects. I'm hoping to have some of you join us as members, whether it be as an annual, multi-year member, subscriber, or a life member. Unfortunately, we do not see many of you come back. I came back because I had such a great time. We have less than 5% return of tag holders. And it's really important that we get you folks to come back and join with us, because we do a good job and we really enjoy the sheep. And we want to make sure that if you have such a great experience that you want to come back and give back, we're more than happy to have you come join us. So please go back, after you complete your hunt, please go to our website and join. Take some pictures, send them to us through our Facebook page. You can get hold of us at info@OregonFNAS.com. Send us some pictures so we can get them on our website, because your success is our success. ODFW looks at our site, it's their success too. Both species of bighorn sheep in Oregon have seen losses in herd size and tag numbers, mostly due to interaction with domestic sheep, as Jeremy said. Tag numbers have dropped over 15% since I drew my tag. The herd that I harvested my sheep from, Lower Wahi, was decimated by an interaction with domestics. 80% of the herd was lost, as well as 10 tags. At that time, we had over 100 tags, and so that was close to 10%. That's a big hit, and that's a lot of opportunity lost from you folks. All the state and game management agencies and all the chapters and affiliates of Wild Sheep Foundation are working hard to make sure that the risk of contact, is what Jeremy talked, and that's actually the term that we use, risk of contact with domestics, is part of the plans for all state and federal lands. So please beware and notify your bio if you see any signs that they have talked about, and try to get the biological samples back to them. My last piece of advice is to you: enjoy the time you will have scouting with your friends. Take advantage of the expanded seasons for the hunts. Take lots of pictures and send them to us for our social media and newsletter. There will be times when it might get tough on your hunt, or things might not be going your way, going as planned. Believe in yourself. Take a day off if you have to. It's part of the experience. Don't get hung up on the score. I've been talking to a lot of the hunters for the last 4 or 5 years, and they say, I want to shoot the biggest one in the unit. Well, that might not be possible. So don't get hung up on the score. Don't put so much pressure on yourself that it becomes, your hunt stops becoming enjoyable. Every ram is a trophy, and each one has its own story. Savor the opportunity that you have. Many of our board members and Oregon hunters have put in for years and will continue to put in for years and will never draw a sheep tag in their lifetime. So you're hunting for them as well as past and future tag holders. Be prepared for your phone to ring next year at the end of June with an excited voice wanting to know about your hunt. So if you need any help, information, inspiration, please feel free to give me a call. Reach out to us through our website. I found out this year, but my phone number was in the regs, and 3 days after the draw, my phone started ringing. And it wasn't people trying to sell me extended warranty on my truck. You can always contact us through our website or Facebook page. Lastly, I've been in your place, talked to some of you the last few weeks, and know the feelings that you're having, and just want you to know that I truly miss not having this opportunity to meet you all in person. Please consider joining Oregon FNAS Wild Sheep National, and thank you to ODFW for putting this on and having a great sheep program.
So just a couple quick questions that popped up while Walter was wrapping up, and then we can transition into our goats. We had a question: is it legal to take rams with collars? The answer is yes. You can harvest any animal in Oregon with a collar. You can harvest that animal. The collar is property of the state, so that when you check in, we will ask that you return the collar back to us. There was a question about, will sheep drink out of a stock tank? Absolutely. If it's in a secure location where they feel safe, they'll absolutely drink out of a stock tank. And many of the guzzlers that we've built throughout the state are either utilize a stock tank or something very similar to a stock tank for those animals to get water. We also had a question about hunt boundaries. All those boundaries are in the regulations. Take a quick peek in there for your specific hunt area boundaries. And then, clarify it with the bio. For this question, you can ask me kind of offline and we can highlight that. I love to sit down and circle it on a map, which we'll do later. And lastly, is pneumonia in our mountain goat populations? Well, no. In the Oregon, we have yet to note any disease issues with mountain goats, but we're always watching. So if you're out on your mountain goat hunt, again, I spoke to sheep in mind just because it was the morning session. For our mountain goat hunters, almost all of the same tactics, theories apply. Watch out and let us know what you're seeing so that we can know that as we move forward. With that, with no more questions, I think that's the end of our sheep portion. We'll transition into our mountain goats.